I had never been to Alaska before. This happened a few days ago. I arrived in a small remote town to write about the folklore of the polar nights. I thought it would be a great opportunity for some eerie stories. I rented a cabin that sat alone in the snow, surrounded by towering pines. The quiet was almost deafening. I settled in and began writing late into the night. I remember feeling like the darkness stretched on forever. I hadn't seen the sun in days. On my second night, I noticed something odd. There were scratches on the wooden wall. They looked old, and I thought maybe they were just from the cabin settling. I brushed it off and returned to my keyboard. But the wind outside howled, and it felt like a warning. Every day more scratches appeared. Each time I looked, they seemed deeper. I tried to ignore them, but then I heard a thump behind me. It was like something had hit the wall. My heart raced. I turned around, but there was nothing. Just me in the empty cabin. I felt cold and I rubbed my arms to warm up. Later that night, as I typed away, whispers floated through the air. I glanced around, but I saw nothing but shadows. I wasn't sure if I was hearing things or if the isolation was getting to me. The silence pressed down heavily. It didn't feel right. I thought maybe it was just the wind again, but something in my gut told me otherwise. The townsfolk were friendly, but when I asked about local stories, their smiles faded. One old man leaned closer and said, "You should leave, especially now." His voice trembled a bit. I hesitated. I could feel their unease, but my curiosity won out. I wanted to know more. That night I sat back in my cabin. The scratching grew louder and more frantic. Thuds echoed close to me. I stepped closer to the wall, shaking. Pressing my ear against it, I thought I could hear whispers, almost forming words. I was scared but curious. I turned to grab my phone to record it. Suddenly a loud crash sounded outside. My heart raced. I opened the door and stepped out into the biting cold. The ground crunched under my feet. Then I saw a figure at the edge of the trees. I called out, asking if he was okay. He just stood there staring at me. He didn't move or respond. A chill ran down my spine. My instincts screamed to run back inside. I turned quickly to the cabin, its warmth a stark contrast to the freezing darkness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, feeling an icy grip around my heart. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Just like that, he vanished into thin air. The night felt darker, the shadows closing in. Something shifted behind me, and I heard a whisper, low and almost mocking. What was that sound? I wasn't sure, but deep down I knew I should have left when I had the chance. As I stumbled back into the cabin, I tried to shake off the unease settling over me. I locked the door and took a deep breath, hoping the warmth would melt away my fear. But it didn't. It felt like the shadows had seeped inside with me. The whispers were still there, subtle yet insistent. I couldn't focus on writing, my mind racing with thoughts of the figure. Who was he? I decided to check the walls, searching for any signs of what might have caused those scratches. As I traced my fingers along the wood, my hand snagged on something jagged. I pulled back quickly, my heart plummeting. It glanced like a nail, but older, worn down, as if it had been ripped free long ago. It seemed almost out of place against the primitive craftsmanship of the cabin. I stepped back, scanning the walls. Then I noticed something, a section of wood that didn't match. It was more worn than the rest, like it had been used and touched repeatedly over many years. A knot formed in my stomach. I had read about hidden compartments in old cabins. I needed to know if this was one of them. With trembling hands, I grabbed a nearby lantern. The flickering light created dancing shadows, but with it I could see better. I approached the odd section, running my fingers over it again. I pressed lightly, half hoping nothing would happen. Just then, the floor groaned and I jumped back, almost dropping the lantern. But the sound drew my attention. From beneath the floorboards a low thud echoed, persistent and rhythmic. I knelt down, listening closely. Hushed whispers mingled with the thuds, as if something were begging to be heard from below. I shuddered. My breath came out in clouds of vapor. But curiosity had a hold on me. I couldn't resist. I took a deep breath and shifted the lantern, looking for a way to pry the boards apart. That's when I saw it. A small, dark stain where the wood met. There was a faint outline of a trap door, almost hidden. My heart raced at the thought of what lay beneath. I fumbled with the edges, trying to lift it. The wood creaked ominously, as if protesting my intrusion. I finally got a grip, and it shifted slightly, just enough for a draft of cold air to escape. I hesitated, doubt creeping in. Should I go on? Before I could back down, a sudden gust blew through the cabin, snuffing out my lantern. Darkness enveloped me entirely. I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking, trying to turn on the flashlight. The beam flickered weakly, just enough to illuminate the edges of the door. I leaned closer, straining to hear over my thudding heart. The whispers grew louder, swirling in my mind, filling me with dread. The cold air from below was sharper now, biting at my skin. And then, just like that, I heard the echo of footsteps above me. Someone, or something, was in the cabin. I froze. My mind raced. Should I hide? Should I call for help? But there was no one to call. My pulse thundered in my ears as the footsteps drew closer, resonating through the silence. The whispering stopped. I held my breath, teetering on the edge of panic. What had I done? What would happen next? I barely dared to breathe, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps above paused, as if listening for something. I fought the urge to bolt for the door, instead gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I had to know who, or what, was up there. Cautiously, I edged closer to the trap door. The whispers had returned, now a breathy chant urging me to listen, to descend into whatever lay below. But the footsteps sounded again. This time, they were moving away, slow and deliberate. I blinked, trying to push back the darkness that pressed against my mind. A few moments passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Clenching my fists, I summoned what little courage I could muster. I couldn't stand still. I moved back toward the trapdoor, heart racing and hands trembling. The chill of the air seeped into my skin. As I knelt, I glanced at my phone's dim light flickering at the edge of my vision. I needed more than just that faint beam. I steadied myself, straining to hear if the footsteps had returned. Nothing. The silence was deafening. Taking a shaky breath, I pressed against the trap door again. This time, it creaked in response, almost as if it wanted to reveal what was hidden beneath. With a final push, I lifted the door completely. Dust billowed out, illuminated by my phone's light. I could barely make out steps leading down into darkness. The space below felt alive, full of the energy of secrets long buried. This time, the whispers grew insistent, almost urgent. I peered down into the shadows, the sudden quiet making my skin crawl. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me, but I felt an equally potent pull toward the unknown. What could be down there? They were calling me. Just as I contemplated descending, a loud crash echoed from above, rattling the floorboards and jolting me back. My blood ran cold. That sound wasn't footsteps. It was something heavy being dropped. Panic surged through me. I stood frozen, trapped between the lure of the trapdoor and the question of what was happening in the cabin. Then faintly, I heard a voice. A low growl that rose above the din of my thoughts. "Get out," it hissed. My stomach twisted, fear racing through me like ice water. Against my better judgment, I peered up towards the ceiling. Shadows shifted in the corners of the cabin, flickering into shapes I couldn't decipher. In that moment, the floor creaked once more, but not under my weight. Something was moving above. I took a step back, heart racing. I had to leave. But as I turned back to the trapdoor, the wind outside howled and a rush of cold air swept in, slamming the door shut with a resounding bang. The whispers grew louder, angry now, an almost tangible force. My senses screamed at me to flee. I dashed for the window, but the only thing waiting outside was the encroaching night and a thick blanket of darkness. What had I done to summon whatever was here? I took one last look at the trapdoor, something dark and ancient pulling at my curiosity. I was out of time. I grabbed a chair and hurled it against the window, splintering the glass. As I leapt through the broken frame, a chill swept over me. I felt eyes on me, watching from within the shadows of the cabin. And as I hit the ground and stumbled away, I heard it. The faint screams of the whispers merging into one final echo. Something wanted to keep me there. And it wasn't done with me yet. The sharp sting of broken glass pierced my skin, but I barely noticed. I scrambled away from the cabin, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The air outside was frigid, biting at my exposed limbs, but I had no time to feel the cold. I stumbled across the uneven ground, my breath visible in the air as panic gripped me tighter than the chill. I could hardly hear myself think over the rush of blood in my ears. The whispers faded but left an eerie echo. I glanced back. The cabin loomed behind me, dark and foreboding, as if it were breathing, waiting for me to return. I wanted to run, but my instincts warred with curiosity. What had those whispers meant? What was truly up there? I turned away, forcing myself to focus. I had a long stretch of woods ahead of me, but the path felt more daunting by the second. I took off into the darkness, the trees casting twisted shadows that danced against the moonlight. As I ran, the quiet of the night enveloped me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. After a few minutes, I stumbled upon a narrow path overgrown with weeds. I hesitated, glancing back at the cabin one last time. The trap door still gaped open, a gaping maw that beckoned me. The thoughts churned in my mind. What if the whispers had more to say? What if they held answers to whatever I'd just escaped? A rustle from behind yanked me back to reality. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing moved but the wind. I shook off the unease and pressed on, determination pushing me forward. I needed to get to safety. Minutes passed, my legs ached, and just when I thought I could put distance between myself and the cabin, I heard a faint crackling sound. I froze. The noise seemed to come from ahead. Something breaking twigs, not far from where I stood. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving, but curiosity dragged me back. I crept forward, silencing my breaths. As I peered through the trees, my heart sank. A figure stood in the moonlight, half hidden in the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, features obscured. I strained to see, but fear paralyzed my feet. A flicker of recognition sent a chill down my spine. It resembled something I had seen before, something from the stories the locals whispered about but no one dared to speak of directly. The stories were always dismissed as folklore, fabrications meant to scare curious travelers. But this was no story. It turned its head and I felt its gaze bore into me. I gasped, a sound that broke the fragile stillness. The figure jerked forward, the moonlight catching its eyes, dark, hollow, and filled with a hunger I couldn't comprehend. I pivoted and ran as adrenaline propelled me forward. I could still hear the whispers rising up again, loud and frantic, mingling with the crunch of twigs beneath my feet. Whatever was hunting me wasn't done. Then everything went dark. The path ahead vanished, swallowed by an unnatural shadow. I stumbled, panic swelling as the cool night air thickened around me. I wasn't alone, and the realization crashed over me like a wave. Just before I lost my footing, I spotted a faint glow, a flickering light through the trees. Hope surged through me. If I could just reach it, but the chilling whisper echoed in my mind, warning me as fear clawed at my throat. I had to know what lay waiting in the darkness. Was it the cabin wanting me back, or something far worse? The light flickered again, drawing me ever closer. I pushed through the underbrush, sharp branches snagging my clothes like cautious fingers. But I didn't care. I had to reach that glow. With every step, the whispers subsided, replaced by the sound of my own panicked breathing. Suddenly I stumbled into a clearing. The sight before me made my heart race faster. An old lantern hung from a crooked tree branch, its flames dancing wildly in the wind. The light illuminated a small, worn-out sign partially buried in the snow. I squinted, trying to read it. "Beware the lost ones," it said, the letters etched in a hasty scrawl. My stomach dropped. Another layer of dread settled within me. What were the lost ones? I stepped closer to the lantern, feeling its warmth against my skin. I had no idea how long it had been here or who had lit it. As I scanned the area, the feeling of being watched crept back. The shadows in the trees seemed to dance like dark figures lurking just beyond reach. I took a breath, willing myself to keep calm. That was when I noticed another figure. This one was more solid. A girl maybe my age stood just outside the light. She looked eerily familiar, with long hair that fell in tangled strands. Her clothes were tattered, and her eyes glistened with something unsettling. Was it fear or desperation? "Help me," she whispered, voice barely a breath against the wind. My insides twisted at her words, but I took a step closer. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated, clutching her arms as if cold despite the lantern's glow. "I'm trapped here. The whispers, they won't let me leave. They want you too." The implication sent a shiver down my spine. I could hear them again now, louder and more insistent, rising around us like a storm. "Stay away," I yelled, but the power of her plea tugged at my resolve. I felt her fear wrapping around me like a vice. "What do you mean? What do the whispers want?" Before she could answer, the forest erupted in movement. Figures began to emerge from the shadows, each one taking form, gaunt and twisted, eyes empty and ravenous. I realized these were the lost ones she had spoken of. They had come for her, and now they were looking at me too. "Run!" the girl screamed. "Run!" My instincts kicked in, and I turned to bolt back the way I came. But the twisted figures advanced, their whispers melding into an agonizing cacophony. I couldn't think. I just had to escape. I dashed through the trees, the lantern's light fading behind me, consumed by the dark. But as I ran, I felt a strange compulsion to look back one last time. That's when I saw it, the girl still standing surrounded by the lost ones. She raised her hand, and with that, the whispers transformed into a chilling harmony that resonated through the air. Suddenly everything sharp and bright went dim. The ground beneath me gave way, and I fell into an abyss of darkness. When I landed, I was in a different place, cold and distant from where I'd just been. Heart pounding, I had no idea what had just happened or where I was. All I knew was that I hadn't escaped. The story had just begun. I blinked a few times, trying to shake off the sensation of falling. My body lay on cool, uneven ground. Unlike the snow-laden forest, this surface felt soft but damp, almost like moss. I pushed myself up, and the moment I stood, a chill crept through me. The air was still, thick with an unsettling silence. I could see the outline of trees on the periphery, but they looked different. Gnarled trunks twisted upward like dying hands reaching for the sky. There were no lanterns here, just an eerie blue glow emanating from somewhere deep within the woods. An instinctive urge pulled me toward it, despite my thoughts screaming for me to turn and run. As I moved cautiously forward, an odd sense of familiarity nestled in my chest. The scene was like a nightmare I had lived many times before, the kind that lingers long after waking. Shadows flickered in and out of sight, playing tricks on my mind. I reached for my phone but found nothing. My pockets were empty save for the thin fabric of my clothes. Panic threatened to rise, but I pushed it down. That's when I heard it. The whispers again. This time they were clearer, distinct words swirling with dread. "Come closer," they urged. "Join us." My heart raced at the thought. I forced my legs to move faster, stepping deeper into the unwelcoming forest. Suddenly, a figure darted out from behind one of the trees. My throat went dry. It was the girl again, the one from the clearing. "Why are you here?" she asked, surprise flickering in her eyes. "They shouldn't have brought you here." "What do you mean? Who are they?" I pressed, trying to catch my breath. She stepped back, glancing over her shoulder. "The lost ones. They are everywhere. They feed on fear, and now that you're here, they will come for you. I thought you escaped." My mind reeled. Her words felt like a heavy weight suffocating me. "I can't stay here. I need to get out," I said urgently. "Follow me," she said, her voice trembling but firm. I hesitated but noticed the area around us darkening. Shadows flickered, creeping closer. It was now or never. I nodded and rushed to her side. We weaved through the twisting trunks, moving steadily away from the glowing aura. The whispers grew frantic, surrounding us. "Turn back! Join us!" they urged in a chaotic symphony, each voice more menacing than the last. "Keep going!" she shouted, her eyes wide with fear. I stumbled slightly, tripping over exposed roots, but she tugged on my arm, pulling me upright. I had no idea where we were headed, but as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, something worse than the lost ones. We burst through a maze of trees and into a clearing. The blue glow was now blinding, cascading over an ancient stone arch. It stood tall, inscribed with symbols I couldn't decipher. "This is the only way," she exclaimed, pointing to the arch. "Wait, what does it do?" I asked, panic rising. "If we can get through, maybe they can't follow us any longer," she said, desperation twisting her voice. Before I could respond, the darkness pulsed around us, the lost ones closing in. With every ounce of courage I had, I stepped toward the arch. It cracked and hummed with energy, trembling as the shadows advanced. Whatever it was, I had no choice but to find out. Then, with a sudden rush, I felt a force pulling me back. The whispers crescendoed into screams, and the arch began to shatter before my eyes. I blinked, trying to comprehend what was happening. The arch wasn't just shaking, it felt alive, as if it was a portal fighting to be sealed. The blue glow became excruciatingly bright, blinding me for a moment. I could hear the howls of the lost ones behind us, their cries piercing through the air like knives. "Come on!" the girl yelled, pulling on my arm with all her strength. I felt as if I was being torn between two worlds, and I didn't know which one I wanted to stay in. I put one foot forward, but the ground beneath me trembled. I glanced back, and my legs turned to lead when I saw the shadows creeping closer, their forms twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. "Just a little closer," she urged, her voice barely audible over the chaos around us. I could feel the energy from the arch pulling at me again, an overwhelming force beckoning. It was dizzying. Could we actually escape? I took a deep breath and dashed forward, heart pounding in my chest. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as if the forest itself was trying to wrap around us in a final embrace. We lunged towards the arch together, the whispers reaching a fever pitch. "Turn back. Join us." At the last moment I shut my eyes, grasped her hand tighter, and leaped through the arch without looking back. The world around us shifted with a violent jolt. For a heartbeat, all I felt was a rush like falling through water. Then, with a loud crack, the sensation stopped abruptly. I opened my eyes slowly, hardly daring to breathe. We stood in a new place. The air was cooler, fresher. Instead of darkness looming, we were surrounded by shimmering lights. I glanced around, taking in the sight. We were on the edge of a vast, tranquil lake, the surface shimmering beneath a star-studded sky. I turned to the girl, expecting relief to wash over me, but her face was contorted in worry. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, her eyes darting around. "They can still reach us." Before I could respond, the lake bubbled violently and mist began to rise. From its depths, shadowy figures started to manifest, more ominous than before. "What are those?" I gasped, fear gripping me anew. "They're not the lost ones," she said, pulling me away from the lake's edge. "They are worse. You don't want to find out how much worse." I felt a cold sweat break out along my brow as I glanced at the rising figures, their forms twisting like smoke. "What do we do?" "Run," she answered urgently. And before I could ask anything more, she took off deeper into the woods, trailing the lake. I followed, my heart racing again. But as we fled, a feeling of dread settled in my stomach. Whatever we had escaped seemed to be right on our heels, and the night was far from over. Then, as we dashed into the thicket, I stumbled. My foot caught on something jagged, and I tumbled forward, hitting the ground hard. The moment I turned my head to see what had tripped me, I froze. That's when I saw it, a shimmering object partially buried in the earth. It was a smooth stone, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. My instincts screamed to ignore it, but curiosity pulled me. As I reached for it, the whispers came back, softer now, laced with something sinister. "Join us." I had a decision to make, and the urgency of it rattled through me. I pulled my hand back abruptly, heart racing. The glowing stone felt like a beacon in the dark, coaxing me closer, yet my instincts told me it was a trap. The mist was gathering again, and I knew I had seconds to decide. "Don't touch it," the girl shouted from a few feet away, her voice tinged with panic. I blinked and realized how far I had strayed from her. The shadows around the lake slithered closer, the figures gaining substance as the whispers grew louder, almost roaring in my ears. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging. "What do we do?" I yelled back, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Just run. We can't stop now." She gestured for me to follow her deeper into the trees. The cold air pricked at my skin as I took off after her, but my gaze flicked back toward the stone. Its glow pulsed rhythmically, and I felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on the girl instead. Branches snagged at my clothes as we darted through the wooded path. My breath came in sharp gasps, and I could hear the shadows growing ever closer. The underbrush crunched beneath my feet, masking the sound of their pursuit, but I could still feel them, just behind us. "Over here," she shouted, veering to the left. I followed her blindly, my thoughts racing. I needed to know what that stone was. Was it a weapon against the shadows? Or was it a lure meant to trap me? We came to a clearing, the moonlight spilling over the ground, illuminating a circle of tall ancient trees. In the center stood a massive stone, similar to the one I had stumbled upon, carved with strange symbols. The air felt charged, almost electric. "This is where we make our stand," she said, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "If they find us here, we can use the stones." I watched her, confusion and fear colliding within me. Use the stones? How do we do that? She stepped closer to the massive one, touching its surface tentatively. "They hold power. If we can activate them, we might be able to keep our pursuers at bay. We just need to—" The ground shook beneath us, cutting her off. The whispers rose again, shrill and panicked. The shadowy figures were closing in, their forms twisting closer to human shapes. Panic prickled at my spine. "Now!" I shouted. "You have to do it now!" She pressed her palm against the radiant stone, and a bright light flared, casting long shadows that danced among the trees. As the light enveloped her, the whispers screamed in unison, a cacophony of rage and desperation. Suddenly, a figure lunged out from the shadows, a wraith-like being with hollow eyes and twisted limbs. My heart raced as I grabbed the girl, pulling her away from the glowing stone. "We can't stay here. It's a trap." But before we could retreat, the ground beneath us cracked open, fissures spreading like spiderwebs. Chunks of earth and roots shot up around us, forcing us onto the stone pedestal. "Hold on to the power! It won't let them through!" she yelled over the chaos. Just as I felt the light around us swell, a terrifying thought struck me. The deeper we went into the darkness, the more I felt the pull of the whispers. What if this wasn't a way to escape? What if it was a gateway to something worse? As the shadows surged towards us with malevolent speed, I realized one thing. No matter what we chose, our fate was intertwined with the mystery of the night. Then, with a blinding flash, everything went dark. The darkness was suffocating, a weight pressing down on me. I blinked, trying to adjust, but I could see nothing, just the sensation of the ground trembling beneath my feet. My heart pounded in my chest, and I realized I was still holding the girl's hand. "Are you okay?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The silence stretched thick and heavy until I felt her squeeze my hand in response. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But where are we?" I didn't know. It felt as if we'd been pulled into a void, far from the clearing. I took a cautious step forward, feeling for anything solid. The air was colder here, an unnatural chill, and an eerie hush settled over us. "Maybe we're inside the stone," I suggested, though I wasn't sure I believed it. If the light was a gateway— Suddenly, a flicker of pale light appeared ahead of us. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make it out, It pulsed weakly, casting shadows on the invisible walls of our dark prison. "Let's go that way," she urged, tugging me forward. I hesitated but felt the urgency in her grip. We couldn't stay here. We moved toward the light, my thoughts racing. What had just happened? Did we really escape the shadows? Or had we stepped right into their lair? As we drew closer, I realized the light originated from another stone, similar to the one in the clearing. Intricate carvings covered its surface, but unlike the last, this one glimmered softly, almost inviting. "Do you think it can help us?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "I don't know," I admitted. An uneasy feeling knotted in my stomach. What if this stone was meant to trap us like the last? Before I could voice my concerns, the ground shook again, but this time it felt different. Dark tendrils lashed out from the walls, snaking toward us like angry vines. "Run!" I yelled, pulling her back. We turned, but more tendrils shot from behind us, blocking our path. Panic surged through me. "Look!" Her voice pierced the chaos. I turned to see more glimmers of light in the distance, more stones. They called out in a way I couldn't understand. "Can we reach them?" I asked, my breath hitching. "They could be our only chance," she replied, her eyes wide with fear. "We have to try." Adrenaline fueled me as I grabbed her hand again and we bolted toward the nearest glowing stone. The tendrils lashed out, grazing my arms as we sprinted. I could feel the darkness weaving closer, tightening its grip. We reached the stone, and she pressed her palms against its surface. The light flared, brighter than I expected, illuminating the shadows around us. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen. "Come on," I urged, glancing back at the encroaching darkness. "Do something." The light flickered, and I felt a surge of energy shoot through me, warming my insides against the chill. Then, with a rush, the shadows recoiled, hissing and twisting away from the stone. "What did you do?" I asked, astonished. "I don't know." Her voice carried a mix of fear and hope. "But it's working." My heart raced as I realized we might have a chance. But just as quickly that hope faded, a chilling thought creeping in. What if the stones weren't a way out, but a way deeper into this nightmare? Just then, a loud crack echoed through the darkness. "That doesn't sound good," I said, dread filling my chest. I turned, and that's when I saw it. A monstrous figure loomed in the shadows behind us, and it was coming closer. The shadows stretched and twisted as the monstrous figure emerged, rising like a storm from the depths of the darkness. Black smoke coiled around it, swirling and tearing at the thin air. I felt the girl's grip on my hand tighten with fear, and my heart sank as I realized whatever it was hungrily searching for us. "Run!" I yelled, breaking free from the stone's glow, leading her away into the darkness. Behind us, the creature's growl echoed, a sound that sent chills racing up my spine. Its presence loomed, the whispers crescendoing into a chaotic symphony urging us to join, to surrender. The light from the stone began to dim behind us, barely illuminating the darkness that was closing in. I glanced back. The creature was gaining ground, and its ghastly face glistened with a hunger that made my stomach churn. "Where do we go?" she shouted, her voice high with panic. The surroundings closed in, branches clawing at us like the very shadows that pursued us. "To the other stones," I called. My mind raced. If the first one could repel the shadows, maybe there was still a chance. We veered toward the next flicker of light cutting through the darkness, each hurried step mixing hope and dread. Laughter echoed around us, low and mocking, as if the very essence of the forest taunted us. I pushed ahead, every ounce of focus concentrated on reaching the next glowing stone. Each time I thought we might lose it, I felt the weight of the creature's approach like a tempest on my heels. In the distance, the second stone pulsed with a vibrant energy. The girl's breath caught in her throat, and with renewed urgency we sprinted toward it. It loomed in the shadows, carved with even stranger symbols, almost catching the whispers we heard earlier. "Quick!" she shouted, moving to press her hands against its surface. I glanced back. The creature was mere seconds away, and shadows enveloped us like a swarm of insects. I gritted my teeth, and just as she made contact, A surge of light pulsed out, illuminating the surrounding trees. The creature howled in fury, its form distorting as it slammed against the outside of the light's barrier. "Hold on!" I yelled, but something much darker clawed at my insides. With each heartbeat, I felt the stone's warmth seep into my skin. While the light surrounded us, I sensed the encroaching shadows scuttling back, but they strained against the light, screeching with rage. The ground beneath us trembled again, shattering the illusions of sanctuary. The creature surged forward, dark tendrils reaching for us despite the barrier, its hollow eyes burning with insatiable need. "It's not enough! The colors are fading!" she screamed, panic threading through the chaos. "No, we need to believe," I shouted back, knowing that faith might be our only weapon. "These stones can protect us as long as we maintain the light." The shadows lunged and darkness flooded around us. For a split second, the light flickered. In that moment, despair squeezed my chest. "How do we make it stronger?" I asked helplessly. "We try together," she shouted. Without thinking, I joined her, pushing my palms flat against the pulsing light alongside hers. Together we focused our energy, willing the light to grow. In that moment, the shadows recoiled, their growls intensifying as the brightness flared. The blinding radiance surged from the stones ahead, illuminating parts of the forest I never noticed before. "Come on," she urged, and we felt a rush of strength flood through us. We could push back against the darkness. I believed in the light with everything I had. A rush swept over me, twisting winds and voices dancing about us. "You'll never get away," the whispers screeched, but I refused to listen. Instead, I focused on the feel of the stone, the way the light pulsed, and the energy flowing from the girl beside me. Then everything erupted. A wild explosion of light engulfed the clearing, scattering the shadows into an abyss. With a final cry of anger, the monstrous figure disintegrated, its existence shattering into the very fabric of the dark that once surrounded us. The whispers fell silent, as though the forest itself held its breath. Breathless, we collapsed to the ground, the weight of fear lifting ever so slightly. I glanced over, meeting her eyes, and relief surged through me. But even as the shadows retreated, a question lingered. "Did we really escape?" I whispered, staring into the depths of the darkened forest where the shadows had resided. She shook her head, breath coming in short gulps. "I don't know," she admitted. "But they are still around. We just bought ourselves time." Around us, the forest stood eerily still. Questions boiled in my mind, and yet a lingering question echoed within me. Was this escape? Or merely the calm before a greater storm? I could feel it in my bones that the shadows would always be there waiting. The air felt thicker than before, as if it knew secrets and would never let them go. As we caught our breath, the glow of the stones flickered softly, illuminating the remnants of our survival. I held on to the hope that somehow we would navigate this darkness too, but deep down I couldn't shake the truth. Some answers might never come. And as the forest whispered with a familiar tone, I knew one thing was certain. I would never forget the power that darkness could wield, and the stories it held, long after we slipped through the veil into the unknown.